Thank you, business management students, once again, and welcome to chapter 15, where we will be looking at purchasing and supply management. Maybe before we move on to purchasing and supply management, it is important for us to understand what we mean by a supply chain. So a supply chain is a network of organizations linked to each other through buying and selling of materials, products, or services. So if a supplier has problems and cannot deliver materials or the products or the services to its customers, the customer may also experience a shortage of materials or products or services. So this might lead to an interruption of operations, which result in an interruption of supply to the next customer in the supply chain or in the chain. It is therefore important that there is a close relationship between organizations in a supply chain. So basically, organizations depend on each other. Even people and organizations, they also depend on each other, as we learned in chapter 1. So in this chapter, basically, we will be looking at supply chain management. And the purpose of supply chain the purpose of the purchasing and supply function in an organization is not only to provide the right materials or the right services or equipment, but also to ensure that they are purchased at a reasonable price that satisfy quality requirements and are also received in the correct quantities at the right place and also at the right time. So these are basically our learning outcomes. I will not go through them. Looking at the introduction, we'll look at the importance of the purchasing and supply function to a business. Then the management task of the purchasing and supply manager. Then we'll also look at the purchasing process and the activities that are followed, and we will conclude. So, in terms of the importance of the purchasing and supply function in an organization, it differs. The importance of purchasing and supply function in an organization differs from one business to the other. So you'll find in other businesses they may have a standalone purchasing function. In other organizations, it may just be part of another function. And in small businesses, that particular role may be assigned maybe to one individual, or it may actually be done by the owners or any of the managers. So as I was saying, the importance of the purchasing and supply function differs from one business to the next. But in most businesses, purchasing has a profound influence on the financial performance and other aspects of the business. So it has actually an effect on the financial performance of the business. For other organizations, purchasing and supply function is actually the greatest expenditure of the business. Most of the financial resources of an organization are spent in the purchasing and supply function, making purchases of materials, raw materials, equipment, and so forth that will then be used in the organization. So if that function, which forms the greatest expenditure of the organization, is not properly managed, the financial performance of that organization may be negatively affected. So purchasing and supply function needs to be properly managed. Okay, so the purchasing and supply function is also responsible for selecting the suppliers who should provide raw materials, who should sell to us, so that we add value and sell to others at a profit. So they select suppliers. And there is need to select the right suppliers. You don't just select suppliers, because it is important that whichever organization that will be selected to be the supplier, they supply those resources or materials or products as may be required in right quantities, of the right quality, at the right price, also at the right time. So if you choose suppliers that are not right, or if you don't select the right suppliers, they may supply quality raw materials but maybe at the wrong time. They may delay the supply of those materials, which may be costly to you because you lose the customers. Or they may supply those materials at the right quality, right time, but then they will be costly to you. So you ought to select the right suppliers. This function also purchase and arrange for the transport of materials to the business. Ignore the noises that may be in the background. It seems there's a fight between there's a fight because I can hear some gunfires out there. I wonder what's happening. But I just hope people are still safe. So they purchase, that is, they buy and arrange for the transport of materials to the business. They also decide on what prices they should accept. They also determine the quality and as well as the quantity of materials or services that can be acceptable. Then they also speed up the process of acquiring materials, and they also receive materials on behalf of the organization. They are the ones that are responsible for the controlling in the warehouse, and they are also responsible for inventory holding or for holding stock in the organization. They also determine when to buy, when to purchase, the timing of purchases. Importance of purchasing and supply function, we are still continuing. I highlighted that this is the greatest, it forms the greatest expenditure of the business or for the business, because purchasing costs are the business' biggest expense. They represent an area where cost savings can actually make a vital contribution to the business profits. So if you manage that particular process correctly, you will be able to make profits. Okay, we will continue. I'm sure I was explaining the point that purchasing costs are the business' biggest expense, and they represent an area where cost savings can make a vital contribution to the business profits. So if you manage purchasing and you are able to source raw materials at a lower cost, you can actually be able to improve or to increase your profits. Every business actually holds stock. The debate is whether it is good to hold too much stock or it is bad to hold too much stock. Others will also argue to say, no, there is no need to even hold stock. But in any organization, stock is held to prevent disruptions when there is an interruption in the flow of material to a business. Aim is to keep inventory levels low without risking an interruption in operational processes. So you don't have to keep too much stock because it is costly. You also don't have to say you can't keep stock in the organization, or you can't keep inventory in the organization, because that may also lead to disruptions. There are different views, such as the just-in-time technique, where they say, no, there's no need to keep stock. But not all organizations will be able to keep up with that. So in short, stock levels should be kept low to avoid or to reduce interruptions in production or operational processes. Purchasing costs, we have already alluded to the point that they constitute a major portion of total cost, and saving on these costs has a greater profit potential than similar increase in sales. So if you can reduce purchasing costs, you can actually be able to increase profits than if you just increase your sales. So in as much as marketing function is very important in assisting organizations to increase or to improve profits, we must not forget the input that may also come from the purchasing and supply function. Purchasing materials of the right quality and price. If you purchase the materials of the right quality and at the right price at the right time, that can also make final products available in the right quantities at a competitive price at the right time to its customers. So there's also the need for quality, to ensure quality is good, also to ensure that the price is acceptable and the time is right, because all those factors, they are also key. As I had said earlier, you may have the correct raw materials, but if they are delivered late, you may still lose customers. If they are at a higher price, if they are supplied at a higher price, that may also come with cost disadvantages to the organization. We'll move on to purchasing and supply planning. Purchasing and supply planning is subject to the overall business planning, and it should be conducted in consultation with other functional areas of the business, because you can't just plan to purchase certain materials without knowing who or which function will then use those materials, without you knowing when will those materials be needed. So whenever you are planning in the purchasing and supply function, you need to know, or you need to consult with other functional areas of the business. Just like we covered in chapter 7, planning will still take place, or planning still takes place at different levels, both at top level management, middle level management, and at lower level management. And the formulation of objectives is one of the most important planning tasks. This I will not explain further because we covered it in chapter 7. But just for the benefit of those that may have missed it, the planning process itself starts with the setting of goals, which are basically objectives. Okay, we will now look at organizing the purchasing and supply function, which basically speaks to organizing, which I believe in chapter 8, we actually covered that one in depth. So the focus of this particular aspect now is merely on the application of organizing in the purchasing and supply function. And there are 4 main issues that we need to discuss or that need to be addressed in organizing the purchasing and supply function. One being the place of the purchasing and supply function in the organizational structure. Is it centralized? Is it decentralized? As in, are the functions buying for themselves? Do they have different units? Do you have different units within the organization that are responsible for purchasing, with each located in each of the functions, or you have a centralized system of purchasing and supply function? Then there is also the internal organization of the purchasing department. How that particular department or that particular function is actually organized. How do people within that organization operate? How do they work? How do they relate? And so forth. Then the coordination also with other functional management areas. How does the purchasing and supply function relate with other functional areas, such as the finance function, marketing function, human resources function, and so forth. Then also the role of the cross-functional teams. The role of the cross-functional teams is also very crucial. Okay, so in terms of the place of the purchasing and supply function in organizational structure, the place of purchasing and supply function in the business is affected by two elements. One being the one that I have explained, the issue of centralization or decentralization. Then also the hierarchical level of the purchasing and supply function in the organizational structure. At which level is it? Is it at the top level? Is it at the middle level? Or is it at the lower level? Then in terms of coordination, it occurs at three levels. So various purchasing and supply activities must be coordinated internally in the purchasing and supply function. The purchasing environment must be coordinated with purchasing and supply activities, and the purchasing and supply function must be coordinated with other functional management areas, as well as the needs of the final consumer. Then the cross-functional teams, their tasks include supplier selection. They also negotiate corporate-wide purchasing agreements, develop cost reduction strategies in terms of where to buy, how to buy, and how can we save costs in terms of purchasing. And also they also develop other sourcing strategies on how they can source materials that may be needed in the organization. And they also help in developing suppliers and the evaluation of suppliers' performance to know who is performing well, who can we rely on as an organization. Then there's also need for control in the purchasing and supply function, because in this case we are saying measures need to be put in place to ensure purchasing and supply objectives are pursued within acceptable and accepted standards or norms according to the policy of the organization in terms of how and where to buy. I'm sure we all know in terms of organizations in South Africa that most of them, before they buy from any organization, they want to see if that organization falls under BEE or BBEE. Those things and those other factors, they need to be considered. Specific attention also should be given to the management task in the purchasing and supply function and the performance of the purchasing and supply activities. So you need to see on whether you are still operating and performing as expected, or there are differences. If there are any differences or deviations, you also see on how that can be controlled or how that can be rectified. So that is the need for the control activity in terms of purchasing and supply function. Okay. But how do you assess? Because for you to be able to control, part of the controlling process involves assessing to see what is on the ground. Is it the same with that which is on the, is the same with that which was planned? So it is essential that management, that the performance of management is evaluated, just like other activities of the purchasing and supply function. Management is intangible and difficult to measure quantitatively, but we can use an evaluation sheet or questionnaire to assess performance of the purchasing and supply function. So there are factors that you can look at if you want to assess the performance of the purchasing and supply function. And the factors that you can look at include price proficiency, supplier performance, timeliness, cost saving, workload, purchasing costs, inventory holding. Remember what we covered in terms of managing current assets. It's not always good to have too much stock in an organization. So if you are holding too much stock, we then see that there is a problem, and you must come with ways and means to rectify that. Then relationship performance with suppliers and relationship with other functional management areas. So those are some of the factors or aspects that you can also look at. Then the process that is followed in the purchasing and supply function. Obviously, this is a process that you ought to see in your textbook and read. But the very first step in the purchasing and supply process starts with the development of a need. So one function or one person in the organization needs to develop a need. What is it that they need? Maybe they want to, if it's the production function or the operations function, maybe they want resources. They need resources for their operational processes or for the production process. So that development of the need will trigger the purchasing and supply process. Once you realize that there's something, there are resources or there are materials that you need in the organization, you contact the purchasing and supply function so that they can start the purchasing and supply process. Maybe you start the process by completing a requisition. Then there's need then to choose suppliers, which will then be the role of the purchasing and supply function. Then there will be a research on prices and whether those materials are actually available. After that, an order will then be issued and the contract can then be concluded. There will still be need for follow-up and speeding up of the process. Then you pay, inspect receipts, distribution happens. If there are errors or wrong materials were delivered, those errors need to be handled. They need to be corrected. If there are any errors, then the order can be paid and it ought to be closed. But there is a clear process that you ought to follow in the textbook where you need to know the step and also the document that will need to be completed at each and every stage, so that you read as you will be studying this particular aspect, the steps in the purchasing and supply function, in the purchasing and supply process.